October 2nd, 2019. It was supposed to be the start of something new for Brandon Boudreaux. A fresh chapter, a new home, stability, maybe even a little peace. But instead, it became a date forever burned in his memory and one of the most terrifying moments of his life. Just 4 months earlier, his world and his marriage had started to unravel without warning. His wife Melani began acting strangely, adopting beliefs that seemed extreme, even cult-like. And then came the accusations. Serious claims against Brandon, one that painted him as dangerous and unfit. But none of it was true, and the lies would eventually unravel. What Brandon didn't know at the time was that his story was connected to something much bigger and so much darker. 3 people would be murdered, though those deaths wouldn't be connected until months later. And shortly after Brandon's shooting, another murder would follow. And at the center of it all, Lori Vallow Daybell and her inner circle, a group consumed by apocalyptic beliefs and dangerous delusions. Lori, her brother Alex Cox, Chad Daybell, and Melani, Brandon's own wife. And that morning on October 2nd, Brandon had just dropped off his kids at school and was pulling back into his driveway when he noticed a Jeep parked nearby. Something about it felt off. Before he had a time to react, a shot rang out, and a bullet shattered his driver's side window, missing his head by inches. And this wasn't a random act of violence. This was targeted, planned. And it marked the first real sign that someone or multiple someones wanted Brandon Boudreaux dead, because whoever pulled that trigger knew him, knew his vehicle, and knew exactly where he lived and the precise moment he'd be pulling into his driveway. And according to investigators, this wasn't just a personal vendetta. This may have been a hit carried out by someone inside Lori Vallow's inner circle. At the time, Lori, her brother Alex Cox, and Chad Daybell were already deep in the world of doomsday prophecies, sealing ordinances, and talk of zombies and light and dark spirits. But Melani had been pulled in it too. Like Lori, she believed Brandon was possessed, a dark spirit wearing her ex-husband's face. Even 2 of their children, according to Chad Daybell's twisted rubric, were labeled dark. Brandon was, in her words, an obstacle to the divine mission. And shortly after their custody battle began, someone tried to remove that obstacle. Today, we know so much more about what was going on behind the scenes. The Jeep, the surveillance, the burner phones, and now nearly 5 years later, Lori Vallow is facing trial for the attempted murder of Brandon Boudreaux. Melani has not been charged, even though she stood to benefit. So what exactly happened that day? Who was behind the wheel of the Jeep? And how deep does the conspiracy really go? I'm Linda with It's a Crime, and in this video, we're breaking down the entire timeline from the moment Brandon saw that Jeep to the new criminal charges tied to Lori and her inner circle. So now, let's get into it. You know what still gets me about Brandon's case? He had no idea he was being hunted. Someone had been watching him. They knew his car, his routine. They waited until the exact moment he pulled into the driveway, and then they fired the bullet, missing him by inches. And the scariest part, today you don't even need to sit in a Jeep to track someone like that, because data brokers are doing it for you online. There are hundreds of companies quietly buying and selling your personal data and your name, home address, phone number, even your family members, all of it floating around the internet without your consent. That's why I've partnered with Incogni, because they tackle this problem head on. They help protect your privacy by scanning these broker databases for your information, then submit automated legal removal requests on your behalf. And they don't stop after one sweep. They keep monitoring and removing month after month. That means less exposure to scams and identity theft, fewer robocalls and phishing attempts, and more control over who has access to your data and less chance of it ending up in the wrong hands. You get more peace of mind. Getting started with Incogni is easy. Just create an account, authorize them to act on your behalf, and let them work their magic. Right now, you can save 60% by signing up at incogni.com/itsAcrime, or click the link below and take one real step towards protecting yourself, because today information is power and sometimes it's a weapon. Now, let's rewind a bit, because by the time someone tried to kill Brandon Boudreaux, his world had already started to spiral. Back in 2018, things were shifting slowly at first. His wife, Melani, had started changing. She went from casually religious to attending the temple daily. And then came the firesides, private meetings that weren't affiliated with their church. Brandon never attended them. He wasn't welcomed. But when Melani came back from one talking about building massive food storage, he knew something was off. It wasn't just spiritual, it was extreme. Then, during a trip to visit her family that summer, things exploded. Brandon's grandfather died unexpectedly. He asked Melani to come to the funeral with the kids, and she refused. But what followed was an all-night argument, the kind that reveals more than it hides. And Melani accused Brandon of hacking into Lori's computer. She even claimed that he was gay. There was no proof, just bizarre accusations. And Brandon was stunned. He was upset. He texted Lori and Charles Vallow that night and said if his family was ruined, it would be on them. Then in June of 2019, after 10 years of marriage, Melani filed for divorce. Brandon didn't know it then, but he had already been labeled. According to Chad, Lori, and Alex, Brandon was a dark spirit, a danger, an obstacle to Melani's divine mission and theirs. In July 2019, just 3 months before the attempt on Brandon's life, Lori Vallow's fourth husband, Charles Vallow, had just been shot and killed by her brother, Alex Cox. Alex claimed it was self-defense, and at the time, no charges were filed. But we now know the truth. Lori was charged and later convicted for conspiring to murder Charles in an effort to collect his $1 million life insurance policy. Only Charles had seen it coming. He changed the beneficiary before his death, and now Lori awaits sentencing, expected shortly after Brandon's upcoming trial. As for Alex Cox, he was never convicted because he died just months later in December 2019. By then, Lori was already deep into an affair with Chad Daybell, a man preaching doomsday prophecies, while his own wife was still very much alive. And a week before the shooting, late September 2019, the pieces started falling into place. Preparations were being made. Around this time, Lori's children, JJ Vallow and Tylee Ryan, were killed. And 2 photos of ammunition taken at a gun store in Idaho were saved to Lori's iCloud account. That same day, Brandon signed the lease on a new rental home in Gilbert, Arizona. A fresh start after a bitter divorce. But someone was watching, and Melani, his now estranged wife, was one of the few who knew the new address. So how did the shooter find him there, unless Melani gave it to them, and if so, for what reason? September 25th, which is 7 days before the shooting, Alex Cox takes Charles Vallow's Jeep, the same one that will soon be linked to the attempted murder. He gets the windows tinted. And that morning, Alex's phone also pings at Chad Daybell's house, not in the backyard where Tylee and JJ would later be found, but close. Alex then heads to Walmart and buys a burner phone. And Brandon, he moves into his new home, completely unaware. September 26th to the 29th, Melani Boudreaux, Brandon's ex and Lori's niece, aka Lori's mini-me, flies to Rexburg, Idaho, and her trip overlaps with key movements and decisions. While she's not directly implicated in the planning, the timing is suspicious. I cover her conflicting statements in a separate deep dive linked below. Now, during the same period, Alex Cox visits the United Sportsmen's Gun Club multiple times. Investigators believe he was practicing, and he checks in under a fake name, C. Quint. And that wasn't just a random alias, it was a direct reference to Captain Quint, the shark hunter from the movie Jaws. And Alex didn't just write it down on a form either. His actual license plate on his own truck read CP Quint. And it's chilling when you think about it. Captain Quint was obsessed with eliminating a perceived threat. And in Alex's twisted world, fueled by Chad and Lori's doomsday beliefs, he saw Brandon as the threat, a so-called dark spirit that needed to be taken out. And this wasn't just a cover name, it was a full-blown persona. He saw himself as the hunter. September 30th, Just 2 days before the shooting, Lori searches for and watches a YouTube tutorial on how to remove the back seat of a Jeep. That same day, Alex's phone bounces between his apartment and Lori's. They live in the same complex, and the phone ends up staying with her until October 3rd. He receives a call from Chad, and then silence. It's believed Alex left his personal phone behind and switched to the burner phone, and to cover his tracks and to create an alibi. And that night, the Jeep, the same one tied to both Charles Vallow and the one that Tylee used to drive, is seen traveling southbound on I-15 towards Arizona, on the road headed for Brandon. And then there's one final twist. According to Kay Woodcock, who would go on to report the children missing and ignite this entire case, Melani suddenly halted her divorce proceedings. Why? Because if Brandon died before the divorce was finalized, she could still collect on his life insurance. And once the divorce was finalized, she got nothing. Now, on October 1st, 2019, the day before Brandon Boudreaux was nearly murdered, Lori Vallow walked into a storage facility in Rexburg and signed a rental agreement. But she didn't sign in as Lori Vallow. She used an alias, Lori Ryan, the last name of her third husband. And it's a detail that she used repeatedly, a tactic to dodge, deflect, or deceive. Meanwhile, that same day, the Jeep was spotted traveling southbound on Interstate 15 near Blackfoot, Idaho. And then at 7:31 p.m., a burner phone registered to Alex Cox lit up. He was communicating with another burner, this one connected to Chad Daybell, and the call lasted about 17 minutes. But this wasn't just small talk. According to Gilbert police, Alex had just arrived in Arizona, and within 1 minute of entering the city, those burner phones went live. And even more chilling, at the same exact time, Melani Boudreaux's cell phone pinged in the area. Her name was redacted from parts of the police report, but investigators traced her digital footprint, highlighted in pink across the FOIA documents, right to that window of time. 3 key figures, 3 digital records, all converging within minutes and just hours before Brandon would be ambushed in his driveway. Coincidence? Police don't think so, and they called it what it looked like: conspiracy. Now at 7:52 p.m., just 4 minutes after the burner call ends, Alex performs a targeted search. Brandon Boudreaux's new rental address. Not his old house, not a guess, the exact location Brandon had just moved into. A quiet home in a suburban Gilbert neighborhood, one that only a handful of people even knew about, and the one that Melani knew. Earlier that same day, Brandon and Melani, still legally married at the time, had closed on the home they once shared together. And soon after that, proceeds were set to be released. Interesting, right? Money was coming, but someone had other plans. That late night search wasn't idle curiosity. It was the final step. Someone was watching, and a bullet was on its way. And that brings us to October 2nd. Today is the day it all changes. Alex Cox is parked in the lot of the LDS temple in Gilbert, Arizona, a sacred space, now the staging ground for a murder attempt. He pulls out his burner phone and searches for direction to Brandon Boudreaux's house. He's not just lurking anymore, he's in motion. At 7:19 a.m., Alex begins the drive. It's unclear whose signal he was waiting on, but the path is clear. Was it Melani Boudreaux? Let me know what you think in the comments. 7:25 a.m. in a quiet Gilbert neighborhood, Brandon is loading his 4 children into the car. And he has no idea what's coming. 8:02 a.m. back in Idaho, a flurry of messages are exchanged. Alex's personal cell phone, left in Lori's hands, starts texting Lori's phone multiple times, then connects for a 23-minute call between them. Meanwhile, Alex's burner phone is at Brandon's property waiting. And police believe that this was no coincidence, and Lori was using Alex's phone to create an alibi, while Alex was still in Arizona stalking Brandon in real time with his burner phone. 9:14 a.m., Brandon returns home from dropping his kids off and coming from the gym, and the kids no longer are in the car. He notices something odd, though: a Jeep idling on the corner near his house. It looks out of place. As he slows down, he sees the back window slide open. Then, a flash of metal, a gun. With a silencer, a shot rings out, and the bullet shatters Brandon's driver's side window and misses his head by inches. Instincts kick in. He doesn't stop. Instead, he floors it to the end of the street and parks near a community pool where he calls 911. In the 911 call, Brandon, clearly shaken, reported, someone just shot my window. When asked by the dispatcher if he saw the assailant, he responded, I didn't see who it was, and the call was partially redacted, leaving some details undisclosed. He later tells police he had only lived in that house for a few days, and very few people knew the address. But someone did. And later that day, Brandon tells detectives that the Jeep matched one owned by Charles Vallow, Tylee's Jeep. And as an insurance agent, Brandon had access to the VIN number, which he handed over to police. A search of the Jeep recovered gunshot residue, DNA evidence, and tied it directly to the scene. 9:19 a.m. to 9:25 a.m., the burner phone tracked to Alex begins moving, heading southbound, leaving the scene. And 2 calls are placed, both to Chad Daybell's burner phone. This wasn't panic, it was protocol. 12:25 p.m. to 12:32 p.m. A few hours later in Rexburg, Idaho, more evidence is being hidden, and surveillance cameras capture Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell pulling into Self-Storage Plus in a blue Nissan Rogue. Over the next 7 minutes, they unload 2 key items from the Jeep Wrangler, a spare tire and a removable car seat. This is critical. Investigators would later note a shot could not have been fired from the back of the Jeep unless the spare tire was taken off and the window wouldn't open otherwise. And this wasn't just cleaning up, it was covering up. And yes, this clip is expected to be a key piece of evidence in Lori's upcoming trial, although she tried unsuccessfully to have it thrown out. 1:22 p.m. Alex is now traveling northbound through the Apache Reservation in eastern Arizona, and his burner phone receives a call from Chad's. 7:46 p.m. to 7:53 p.m. That night, Lori is Googling news reports from Gilbert. Her search terms are chillingly specific. Gilbert AZ News, man shot in Gilbert AZ, man shot in Gilbert AZ 10/2/2019, and AVC News Brandon Boudreaux. She's not looking for comfort, she's looking for confirmation. And Chad, he's searching too, but strangely, his timestamps are missing. And they weren't checking in on a friend, they're verifying the silence, seeing if Brandon was dead. 7:53 p.m. to 8:42 p.m. As Alex moves into Utah, his burner phone pings 3 more times, each connecting with Chad's burner. The last one hits near Green River, Utah, then nothing. And the phones may have gone dark, but the digital trail was already burning, and now so does the truth. And as all of this is unfolding, Lori Vallow is feeling hopeful enough to go ring shopping. That same night, she orders wedding bands for herself and Chad Daybell, even though Chad is still very much married to Tammy. After the attempt on Brandon's life, there would be an attempt on Tammy Daybell. And 1 week after that, she'd be dead. Now, the next day of the attempt on October 3rd, 2019, at 4:28 a.m., it's still dark on U.S. Highway 20 near Rexburg, but the Jeep Wrangler is wide awake. Captured on camera, it rolls northbound in the early morning hours. The same vehicle tied to a failed assassination attempt is now quietly returning to home base, Arizona to Idaho overnight, a getaway across state lines. 9:30 a.m. in Gilbert, Arizona, Melani Boudreaux sits down with the police. Oddly, she's brought her 2-year-old daughter along for an interview centered around attempted murder. And detectives say when they called Melani the day before, she didn't even ask why. She confirmed she's related to Lori and Alex, but insisted that they're not close. She wouldn't provide their phone numbers, claiming that she feared they were being tracked. As for her whereabouts during the attack on Brandon, she's foggy. She says sometimes the park, maybe the gym or the mall. Not sure what I did yesterday, she tells police. She remembers Brandon texting her to say that he'd had a bad day, and she replied hoping tomorrow would be better. But when detectives told her someone tried to murder him, she had no reaction, no fear, no emotion, just silence. 2:11 p.m. to 2:14 p.m. back in Rexburg, Surveillance cameras catch Lori Vallow and Alex Cox returning to Self-Storage Plus. Yes, yesterday it was Chad and Lori who made the drop-off. Today, Lori and Alex are back to retrieve what they stashed: the spare tire, the removable rear seat from the Jeep Wrangler, and a murder vehicle is being quietly dismantled and reassembled under the cover of routine errands, and no one, not yet, is the wiser. 2:20 p.m., 9 minutes later, Alex's phone pings back at his apartment, back home, back to normal, another box checked, another trail they hoped erased, but they missed something. The cameras, burner phones, license plate readers, the digital footprints, and the patterns, and the eerie silence that screamed louder than words. They thought they could clean it up all in a day, but every move they made told a story. October 9th, 2019, the investigation may have gone quiet, but Brandon Boudreaux was done waiting. And October 9th, just 1 week after someone tried to shoot him in the driveway, Brandon hires a private investigator, and then he vanishes with his children into hiding. This is also the time that week that the first attempt would be made on Tammy Daybell. But Melani Boudreaux had her own plans. Days later, she sends Brandon a text telling him she's moving to Boise, Idaho, with or without the kids. And it's packaged as a civil co-parenting proposal, but beneath the surface, it's layered with lies. It says, the kids could remain with you in Arizona. You'd need to arrange daycare. I could have them for holidays and summers, or I could take the kids to Idaho, enroll them in school, and you could have them for summers instead. Let me know what you'd like to do. Sounds like Boise, Idaho, right? That's what she says. But the truth, she's heading to Rexburg, to Lori, to Alex, to the center of the storm. Brandon, meanwhile, is uncovering more than just deception. He tells Gilbert police he was shocked to find out that he was still legally married and says flat out he's not giving the kids back. Then Melani shows up at school to pick them up early, only to discover Brandon never brought them in. She files a report with Gilbert PD. A detective asks her about her plans to move to Idaho. She doesn't tell them the truth either. But by October 17th into 24th, while investigators scramble, Lori and Melani are in Hawaii, and Tammy Daybell's murdered. While they're in paradise for them, it's not a vacation, it's a veil. By October 28th, Melani signs a lease at her new apartment, not in Boise, in Rexburg, and the exact same complex as Lori and Alex. Brandon informs the police. And by November 1st, Detective Ray Hermosillo of Rexburg PD is pulled in and begins surveillance on Lori. He discovers the Jeep used in the attempted murder of Brandon. It's here in Rexburg, hidden in plain sight. And Melani Boudreaux showed up unannounced at the home of Brandon's relatives in American Fork, Utah, claiming the Holy Spirit told her her children were there. She brought a car seat, a suitcase, and a silent man in the car, her uncle Alex Cox. When told the kids weren't there, she walked through the house anyways, looking for them, and then came the veiled threats. If you know what's good for your family, tell me where Brandon is. And the visit lasted nearly 2 hours, with Melani and Alex circling the house repeatedly. Days later, she was arrested in a custody dispute, accused of interfering with parental rights, but it wouldn't be the last time that she crossed state lines looking for something she believed was hers. And that same day, Brandon tells Gilbert police that Melani is still paying for a life insurance policy on him, even though he asked her to remove herself from the policy. Then 2 days later, it was nearly 10:30 at night when Melani Boudreaux returned uninvited to Brandon's parents' home in American Fork, Utah. She claimed to have a court order to take the children. She didn't. And this was the second time she'd shown up at the property after dark. But this time, police cited her for criminal trespassing and told her to leave. And she didn't. Instead, officers arrested Melani for criminal trespass enhanced by domestic violence and booked her into the Utah County Jail. Her uncle, Alex Cox, bailed her out the next day for $1,950. And then just 5 days later, Melani and Brandon's divorce was finalized in court. She didn't appear, though. Brandon was awarded full custody of their 4 children. That same day, Melani popped up on an LDS dating app. And by the end of the month, barely 2 weeks after her arrest and 5 days after losing custody, on November 30th, Melani Boudreaux married Ian Pawlowski in Las Vegas. A new husband, a new last name, and a new chapter in a story that was far from over. Brandon Boudreaux survived that October morning, but make no mistake, He wasn't just lucky. He was marked. And the people closest to him, the ones who should have protected him, were the very ones plotting his death. The Jeep, the burner phones, the late night calls, the last minute search for his new address, none of it was random. This was calculated, coordinated, cold. What started as a messy divorce quickly unraveled into something far darker, something that would later link back to multiple murders, missing children, and a cult-like group willing to kill for what they believed was a divine mission. A mission they believed justified everything. But here's the thing about the truth. You can hide it for a while, bury it beneath lies, burner phones, and sealed documents, but eventually it catches up. And nearly 5 years later, it's catching up with Lori Vallow Daybell. She's now facing these charges of conspiracy to commit the attempted murder of Brandon Boudreaux. Melani hasn't been charged, but the questions haven't gone away. Chad Daybell hasn't been charged. And justice has a long memory, because while Brandon lived through that morning, he'll never forget what it revealed, that someone wanted him dead. And someone he once loved just might have helped pull the strings. Lori Vallow Daybell's new trial begins with jury selection on May 29, 2025, with opening statements set for June 2nd. I'll be streaming it all, so make sure you're subscribed and mark your calendars. And a big thank you to today's sponsor, Incogni, the personal data removal service that keeps your info out of creepy hands and off shady broker lists. If you haven't already, you can save 60% by heading to incogni.com/itsAcrime, or just click the link in the description. They even offer a 30-day money-back guarantee, so there's literally nothing to lose except your digital footprint. For viewers who love connections, everything in this case is connected. If you're ready to see the lies and contradictions in Melani Boudreaux's own words, watch this next. And if you want to dive deeper into the Brandon Boudreaux case, I've put together a full playlist for you right here.